I will be your moderator for today. My name is Carol Gadungu. So on board with us this afternoon to take us through this topic is somebody that we hold in very, very high esteem. He is our Director of Finance at Springboard Capital and chairs the Finance Committee and brings to us great wisdom and great insights with regards to how to manage our finances and how to run a great business. Now, you'll agree with me that finances are a very, very important part of business, without which we cannot run businesses that are profitable and businesses that make sense. Finances are very, very important to us as businesses and to us as individuals. And so Mr. Henry Ndungu, who is a director in quite a number of organizations, if I start to list his CV here, will occupy the entire 1 hour. So allow me just to say that he's great at advisory. He's in the business advisory space, entrepreneurship advisory space, family advisory space as well. If you have any questions to do with that, you are welcome to ask him. And he holds directorships in quite a number of companies and brings oversight, wisdom, and guidance. And so let's put our hands together for Mr. Henry Ndungu, who will take us through this presentation. We request that we listen to the presentation first, and once we are done, we can ask questions. Over here to you, Henry. Welcome and talk to us.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so I'm actually very excited to just share a few tips here and there about some financial tips that most probably we can apply, especially in these times. It's been a tough period, and tough periods requires that we put a few tough measures. Otherwise, if we don't apply these measures, then we can actually sink the boat. I will actually engage you using a presentation. I'll just put it up, then we can just go through it. We'll just have the presentation, and then at the end of it, we can actually ask questions, and you can feel free to ask whatever comes to mind. So without further ado, because we don't have much time, I will just basically continue, and then we can kick off. So I hope it's visible nicely. So
it is visible, although presentation mode would make it better. Yes.
Is it there now?
Yes.
Okay, well done. So I just want to tackle this topic using 5 items. First, I first and foremost want to look at the financial perspective of the pandemic, the issues that we are all dealing with in one way or another. I will also, not so much because time is limited, to just look at a few financial responses that people are putting up for the pandemic. And more specifically, I know that our audience is a mix of business people and also employed people. So I will look a bit on the business level, decision making at the business level. I will also look at decision making at the home front, or if you like, individual level. And then we'll have a quick question and answer forum. Keep the questions coming. I'm sure you can, I don't know whether the chat has been activated. That's one way that we can put through the questions. Then we'll tackle them at the very end. So without further ado, I'll just highlight a few things. These are not new things. I'm just putting you in the perspective of the decision-making tips that we'll be discussing shortly. What has this pandemic brought home? And quite clearly, there has been quite of reduced business. The money moving around the economy has been quite reduced, and many businesses are actually suffering. Some of them registering, if you like, zero revenue, and quite a number registering declined revenues. Although it's also good to acknowledge the fact that some businesses, depending on what your line of business is, have also had some increase. in case you deal with things that relate to health issues. Something else that most of the businesses are going through, obviously, is tight cash flows. Though you might have high or same business, you might have realized that most of your customers or most of the people you deal with to transact are now asking for longer credit terms. So basically, this has been affecting the cash cycle, the time it takes for you to use your money to buy goods, and by the time you get your money back, that now is taking a bit of time. Of course, most scary has been the business uncertainty and sometimes even closure. Uncertain closures, and you don't even know when you will ever open. And this, of course, has been occasioned by the fact that it reaches a period where you can no longer sustain your business. You need to sort of hibernate for a while. And then when the things look up again, then you come back again. On the employment side, there's been quite some redundancies and obviously pay cuts. This has been very predominant, and especially in businesses that are really affected head-on, things like hotels, things like bars and restaurants, things like airlines. Of course, all this has come hard hitting. So just looking at that perspective, we can just look at a few responses that most probable we will have to be aware or have to engage to be able to cover, ourselves well. And what is very important, and I think it will be the highlight of this webinar, is the need to put our books in order. Our needs to keep evaluating ourselves. The economists say that there's always a ripple effect. Every time the economy has been injected with some cash, or some cash has been withdrawn from the economy. And this ripple effect, depending on the line of the business you're in, can either be direct or indirect. For example, if you've been supplying things, if you're actually having a hotel and you've been forced to close, if you've been having a bar and you've been forced to close, then this is a very direct impact on your business. But you can also have an indirect impact, whereby most probable you supply things to restaurants, you supply luxury goods to middle incomes. Right now, people have tightened the belt, so to say, and there's very little happening on the luxury front. So very important in this will be the issue of forecasting for our business revenues and cycles, because only in ensuring that we are able to forecast well will we be able to make important decisions for our businesses and even for ourselves. So without further ado, I will just go directly to, I'll just be giving tips, and everyone will be able to evaluate whether you're in business or you're in self-employment, whether you are in your own side hustle and hobby. Of course, we've seen quite a number of people engaging in different forms of business or the other. And this is very healthy because that shows that we have an entrepreneurial mind. And this mind is actually what begets dreams, and people grow things and eventually realize that the business has taken over and it's running a life of its own. So at the business level, what decision making will we need to do? And I would break down decision making at the business level in 4 fronts. And we cannot but not shy away first dealing with profit and loss. We all have to evaluate how sustainable our businesses are, most probable going forward or even now. And this for sure is evaluated by a profit or loss. And like I said before, this evaluation will really force us to actually keep a minimum level of records. And they keep saying, if you don't measure your business, then you can't tell whether you're growing, you're receding, or you're just busy. Another thing that is very important is the issue of budgets. And then something else that we will take you through is the issue of evaluating our assets and liabilities. The accountants like to call it balance sheet, and just checking how is our balance sheet looking. And lastly, but very important, and especially now, will be the issue of looking at our cash flows. And maybe if I tackle each and every one of these, I will kick off with the profit and loss. This, I will say, is mainly looking at how we are doing in terms of incomes and expenses. And the most important thing is that this has to be reviewed depending on the business cycles that you have, depending on the level of transactions that you have. If the level of transaction is very high, you do very many transactions in your business, then this evaluation of profit and loss now needs to come to shorter periods. If previously you are doing it monthly, then this time you might need to do twice in a week or weekly, depending on the level of transactions. If you do very few transactions, then you can actually be able to evaluate a transaction at a time. If your transaction cycle, for example, is 2 weeks, from the time you start the transaction to the time you finish the transaction, and you don't have many transactions, then you can comfortably, depending on the level of transactions, do a transaction by transaction evaluation. And what's the main purpose in looking at our profit and loss? What do we look out for? When you're looking at our profit and loss, of course, we start with our incomes. Where are our incomes? What incomes do we have? What lines of business are we running? If it's a big business, then most probably the line of business will mainly be focused on one area. But even without one area, you will have different opportunities that most probably you can grow. And even in this season, they say that all the clouds have a silver lining. And when evaluating your profit and loss, when you're seeing that one line is not doing so well, you will actually discover that because of the push for better revenues, you will actually be able to evaluate yourself and see what other lines within my sector can I kick off, or do I diversify into other sectors? The other item that most probably we'll be looking at in our profit and loss is that if a business risk is higher, then we have to look out for opportunity to spread our portfolio. Now, when I talk about business risk, here I'm talking about how well am I sure that this business will be sustainable? How well am I aware that I will get orders in this line of business for tomorrow, for the next month, and for the other days? And even after I supply, how sure am I that I will be able to be paid and be paid in time? And these are all risks. Or even, if you like, how sure am I that some people have contractual arrangements, and there are people who are even now, I know companies who have entered into leases, and what they are doing is they're not even raising a PO so that they are able to delay the payment as much as possible. And here, the advice that I will give is that we have to keep evaluating what's the risk of the business. From the very first time I put the money to the very last receipt of my money together with the profit. And what I can say is that we have to keep thinking through. Do we spread our portfolio? Will we put our eggs all in the same basket? So do we look out for other sectors? Do we look out for other regions? If you've been supplying something in one region, do you explore ideas of supplying in another region? Do you look at looking at other supplies, other customers? And here we have to be very agile and move with the times. The other item that we will have to look at the profit and loss is we have to be truthful to ourselves. If a line of business is not doing well, we have to keep analyzing it. And we have to keep analyzing and making harsh decisions. Do we hold the business? Do we completely stop the business? And this has to be informed with the records that you are keeping. I'm sure you are all aware about a number of hotels that have closed business. And of course, before COVID, it was unthinkable to even think that such hotels would actually close business. But this all is all based on record keeping. And you realize that you're keeping on eroding the profit you made in yesteryears. And instead of eroding profit, you better sell the business as a going concern, or you hold it, hibernate it, and reactivate it when things shape up. The other thing that we have to look now on the expenses side is, of course, we've had this story about the essential and unessential costs. And here we have to be very radical, if you like. Some of the classical expenses like that we've been seeing in our businesses, up and including rent and everything else, now have to be challenged. Are we using the things that we are actually paying for? Are we using our offices? And for how long will we need our offices? Are we using the whole wing? Most probably we have rented. Do we need all of it? And we have to go line by line in our profit and loss and make critical evaluation and see what can we be able to shed? What is essential? What is not essential? For example, I know people who most probably own a fleet of vehicles that are no longer operating, and they have stopped insurance for a while. Because do you need insurance when the car is parked? Of course, there is a risk, but is a risk major? Then you keep evaluating and seeing, what do I manage? I've had people who have renegotiated their rent, and all these are measures that we've put, that people can put in making sure that we have actually managed our profit and loss. The main reason for our profit and loss is a long-term aspect, because if your organization or business keep making losses, if it keeps making losses, it's time to think through, do I want to keep eroding my profitability that I made earlier, or do I stop, or what do I do? Next item that I would like to discuss here, and I really have to be honest in this one, it's actually a very interesting topic, especially in African culture. Of course, many people move with just the profitability. You just want to look at whether you're making a profit or a loss. And if you're making a profit, most of the time, we actually never push to make a budget. But this is a very critical tool, and especially now. It's not enough to make a profit and loss. You need a budget, because a budget keeps you in check and keep everything in perspective. You basically are able to compare what are your future expectations for both incomes and expenditure. As you might have realized, the profit and loss is historical looking. Now the budget is forward looking. And in the forward looking, you ask yourself very important questions. What is our pipeline? Where are we getting the business? Where are we able to sell? And if we don't have a very good pipeline, then we ask ourselves, then are we able to sustain the expenses that we have, and for how long? So these are very important questions, and these will only come up with a budget. Now, if you had a budget before COVID, then what is very important is that we need to redo the budget with the current circumstances so that our budget remain relevant. A question that many people ask is, of course, why the need for a budget? Why do you need a budget? And like I highlighted, this is a forward-looking tool that a business uses. We need to remain very critical to what we put in the budget. It should not be too high, neither should not be too low. We basically need to stretch. If you like, now with many people doing exercises, jogging, walking, I'm sure you set targets that today I will most probably do 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, and whatever you put is what you're able to figure out that you're able to stretch and become better as you move on. And a budget, if you like, is a dream where we dream for us to be able to achieve something, to be able to move to the next step. So this is very critical, although not well used. It's a tool that we really need to look at. And once you set up the budget, of course, you have to keep comparing with how you're going day by day. How are you hitting what you had budgeted, both on the incomes and the expenditure? And what I would say is that if you realize that the incomes are really dipping, then you have to be very radical in cutting down on expenditure. And these are the times now you hear people saying, I'm moving out of that office. What really informs them that we need to move out of this office is because you've compared the past and you have looked at the future and you can see how things are running, and then you make a decision in the nick of time before your cash flow is loaded, before your bank runs dry. The budget also helps us to make decisions on the spend, like I said. For example, it's not a good thing that every business make the same decisions, because every business is different. Someone might be cutting on expenditure on advertising, yet it's not good to cut on advertising, because most probable, if you advertise, you will make more revenues. There are people who have introduced pay cuts, and the question we have to keep asking ourselves, what informs us? Is it because other people are doing, or is it because we have evaluated and we have seen that for us to survive, then we need to make this? This is a tool that will really help us to make that call. The next item for us to look at is our balance sheet. And if you like, in a nutshell, because of time, this actually really helps us to be able to evaluate the potential of the assets we have, and to make sure that we really exploit that potential for those assets. And obviously, to check the weight of our liabilities. We have to keep checking how much we are carrying on our backs, and check whether we will still manage to carry them, and for how long we will be able to carry them. Now, first and foremost, and this of course applies even in individual decision making, is that we really have to look at our balance sheet, at our assets, and ask ourselves, are we having idle assets? And what are idle assets? If you like, idle assets is assets that don't generate any revenue. This can be cash, this can be land, this can be cars, or any other type of asset that you have. And this is the reason why you've heard stories of kindergartens converting most probable their classes into poultry farm or whatever other thing you've had. And the main thing that people look at this is, do I have an idle asset? And if you realize that you have an idle asset, the next question we need to ask ourselves, how do I generate revenue out of this idle asset? And I'm sure you've all seen cars parked by the roadside, basically selling merchandise. And this is what informs these people. If I have an idle asset and I have an idea how I can use this idle asset, then so be it. If I have some land, it's in a prime place, can I convert it to parking? Can I convert it to, I don't know, stalls? Of course, whatever possibilities that you can think about. And to quote someone, money begets money. Basically, these assets costed you money, and if they're not begetting money, you have no business having them. You better have your cash, protect it, and move on with life. Then the other question that you need to ask yourself is, what assets are best to hold? Are your assets pure assets, or are they liabilities? Of course, even on a personal note, quite a number of us own cars. And the question we keep asking ourselves, is our car an asset, or is our car a liability? And I've been seeing some forwards from different organizations reminding us to keep starting the engine of our cars. And the question I keep asking myself, if you had 2 cars, for example, as a family, and things have become a bit tight, do you still need the 2 cars? Because in a nutshell, if you keep starting your car, it's a liability because you have to keep fueling. And if that car breaks down, it's still under your care and you have to fix it. And of course, the question we need to ask, we need to look at our balance sheet and really ask ourselves, an asset is something that helps us generate some income. A liability is something that does not help us to generate anything. And we need to keep asking ourselves, what do we need to get off? What do we need to hold? Of course, interestingly enough, things have really changed. Now we are all working home. And we had a discussion with a friend of mine, and they were saying, oh, my wardrobe is full of, very expensive suits and, I don't know, shoes and everything else. And the question we ask ourselves, are we still adding to the wardrobe? Do we really need those assets? Or, it will just be to fill up the wardrobe and nothing happens. The next question we need to ask ourselves, how are we able to protect the value of the assets that we have against depreciation or inflation? Maybe to put it in plain language, if you had 10,000 today, that 10,000, if it's under the mattress, if you remove that 10,000 5 years later, the things it can buy now would not be the things it can buy in another 10 years. And basically that means that you're not able to protect the value of your cash from inflation when you keep it under the mattress. So we have to keep checking for the physical assets. How do we protect them against depreciation? We have to put our assets where, we are able to manage the depreciation. Are we able to put money in assets that appreciate instead of depreciate? If it's cash or cash form, are we able to protect the value of our cash from inflation by ensuring that we are getting some interest if it's idle cash? So these are questions that we really need to ask ourselves. The other question is, are we able to sustain our liabilities, or do we need to reschedule? Basically, liabilities is our debts. So you have to keep checking on your debts and asking yourself, am I able to repay my loan in the next 2 months, in the next 1 month? And if that is not happening, then you don't have to wait for the month to close. Plan, make a decision, and then check, do I reschedule? Do I give a bit of equity into my business? If my business is still profitable, then I can attract some investors and tell them, I have this loan and this loan. Can you also inject a bit of cash? And then you're able to help me to repay so that we all stay afloat. And these are hard questions that we have to ask ourselves in terms of the leverage. Leverage basically means the ratio between your equity and the cash that you've put in and your debt. I guess I'll need to really move fast because of time, but the last and first, most important, if you like, is the cash flow. And this, I say, is the health of your business. You really have to handle your cash flows very well, because if you're not able to handle your cash flows very well, then the operations will go haywire. And here, the cash flow is basically evaluating, and in a forward-looking manner, our cash needs and our cash inflows over time for the next 1 week, for the next 2 weeks, for the next 1 year, and basically planning how we intend to meet those needs. Of course, with a bit of proportional devaluation of the cash in, because sometimes our expectations are not met. Then, of course, we need to come up with action points to ensure that the cash needs are met, and of course, that we are able to fulfill our obligation. Some of the tips that we can do here is to defer some cash uses. And that's the reason why we are talking about non-essential and essential expenses. And also the other thing we can do is negotiating for longer credit terms with our suppliers and maybe increasing the limit of our credit. The only other thing that we really need to look out for is we don't engage in illiquid assets. Illiquid assets are things that you're not able to convert to cash with a lot of ease. For example, land. And of course, there's always a temptation to buy land because it's a good deal and the margins are very healthy. But I want in here that cash flow is like blood to a body. Your body can have muscles, but very strong muscles indeed. But if you don't have blood to supply energy to those muscles, then you're as good as 6 feet under. So we really have to watch out for cash flow, because you can have a very good profitability, but unless your cash comes in and you're able to fulfill your cash needs, then sooner or later, the business will flop. And usually what happens is that even the profitability you are making basically becomes depleted. Something that we really need to watch out for, of course, it's a big temptation right now, is the owner-director cash withdrawals. Because these, of course, strains the business, and of course, the business needs the cash flow. The other thing that we really have to keep checking is in our assets, if we have idle assets, can we convert some of them? Can we sell some of them so that we have a bit of cash flow? In terms of credit access, we need to be very clear on the opportunities. And like I said before, the opportunity not only need to make some profits, but it also needs to make some good cash flow so that you're able to meet your needs. So that's it on the front of business. And quickly, I will just quickly run through what we will have on the individual side or the home front, and then we'll have a quick question and answer. At the individual level or at home front, if you like, first and foremost, I'm sure this has been insisted by very many people, it's investment in your health. And here I cannot claim to be a very good advisor on it. Just a few tips that I think are very important. That first and foremost, health is your biggest asset. And of course, if your health is not good, then your biggest liability. And so even when you're discussing financial decisions, you really have to take care of your biggest asset, liability, for you to stay financially afloat. And here, of course, we really have to ensure that we have set up good time for good exercise, for whatever, any motivation that you will need. And of course, diet issues, posture at work. Of course, right now, because we are really working from home, it's my advice that you really have to invest in a good chair, for example, because you will have push and push at work. You will stay there seated for long hours, but if you don't have a good chair, then that can find you into some financial distress, going to hospital, etc. One thing I would really want to highlight here is, of course, with our economy, unlike in Europe, where you find millionaires and not so good to do economically people, they more or less stay in the same neighborhoods. In fact, in Europe, distinguishing between a millionaire and a normal citizen is usually pretty hard, because they more or less shop in the same neighborhoods. The schools are more or less the same, mainly because the governments have really settled the minimum wage issue, the issue of amenities and everyone. And you might actually find even millionaires actually using the trains to go to work, and they don't even have cars. Now, for us here, the setup is quite different. And actually, you will say they are the suburbs, they are the good areas, and all these other things. And that sometimes makes us be slow to be making decisions about downgrading, especially when things are tight. One thing I would like to highlight is that downgrading, when things are tight financially, is actually the only opportunity to stay afloat. And if you make it in good time, depending on how conservative you are, to grow financially, because it's very easy. For us, and as an individual, it's mainly how much cash is coming in and how much cash is going out. And if we are to copy the animals, of course, animals hibernate during winter because they know that basically there are very little fodder for them to eat. So they actually preserve the energy that they have made, and they actually hibernate. Here, of course, if you're married, this has to be a communal decision. And of course, things have to be on the table to be very clear that we need to do this. And of course, you market as the idea, and the other person has to buy it for it to be successful. Cash management at the personal level is that we have to ensure that non-essential items and luxury cannot be done right now. And there's something that I usually like most, that to know how well you're doing is to just check how much money you have in your pocket. And if you put up your monthly expenses, for how long can your money push you? Now, if you realize that you're operating with something below, for example, 3 months, 4 months, then you need to be worried on how well you're spending your cash. Something else that we really have to look out for, COVID has presented quite a bit of opportunities in the saving. Previously, we used to move a lot. So there's a bit of saving. We have saved on fuel. If you have children who go to school, we are not paying a full fees if you're online, if you're on online schooling. If you're not on online schooling, you're not paying anything. We have saved a bit on lunch. Of course, social expenditure, the parties, the birthday parties, if you like. I hope the ladies don't look at me badly. Of course, you've saved quite a bit. And we have to keep consolidating all these savings. We can't look at the savings and not having a plan for them. We have to document and start having a saving culture. And for example, after you make the saving, we have to invest. And you have to invest preserving the value of the cash that you have saved. You can do unit trusts, you can do T-bills, and you can make bonds. And lastly, of course, we discussed about having areas where you can have opportunities, may it be in your hobbies, baking, or whatever. Make sure that you keep growing your incomes. And on the issue of budget, like I said, in the business front, you still need a budget. You need to curb, and most probably have a good friend or partner who can keep you in check to ensure that you are actually within your budget. For those who are lucky that most probably their business are still doing well, that you're still receiving a full income, this is the time to grow. Ignite the saving culture, look out for opportunities to save and invest. And for the interest of time, I want to close there. And now I would like to hear what questions we have. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very, very much, Henry. Guests and members on this call, I promised you that a lot of wisdom was coming forth. You can see that we have discussed many areas that we can look into, many opportunities for us to think differently and to innovate. Henry will not look at you badly because of the birthday parties, but we shall take that into consideration and see where we can save and actually have that savings culture be part of us. You have talked about many interesting things, us taking stock take of our lives, taking stock take of our individual businesses, what we can or cannot do and what we can do better, and being in continuous evaluation mode to be able to measure it in order to do something about it. Guests and members on this call, this is the time for question and answer. Please put your questions on the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question, and Mr. Henry or anybody else who has the capacity to answer will do so. So Q&A is open. We welcome questions. There's one comment on the chat saying this is a great presentation, Henry, so please take note of that. There's a participant saying that this is an amazing presentation. So please populate the chat with your questions and or ask. I'll start with my question as we wait for questions to come in. Henry, you're telling us not to invest in land. We are Kenyans, the Mugonda thing and Buroti, and how can you tell us not to invest in this? It feels counter the Kenyanness in us. Please expound a little bit more on that. It's of high concern.
Okay. Like I said, there are two things that as an individual or as a business, you have to keep checking. And this is profitability vis-a-vis cash flow. Now, like I said, cash flow is the blood of the business or an individual. You can actually be a book millionaire, but you actually sleeping hungry. And the question is, can you eat a title deed? You cannot eat a title deed. If you have some expenses to pay, your electricity is being switched off, can you pay with your title deed? No, you cannot pay with your title deed. And the question you have to keep asking, the cash I have, how long can it sustain me? How long can it cover me? If you have cash, idle cash, for sure invest in land, but it has to be, you are not looking at using that cash in the short term. So I'm not saying you don't invest in land. If you get a very nice deal, go ahead, invest in land. It will bring you some profit. If you really think it's a very good deal, go ahead and hopefully you will get someone to sell to. But be very careful, because converting land, if you start selling now and there are no cash flows in the economy, you might be really shocked. Yes.
All right, thank you for that great answer. Let us be cautious and proceed with wisdom, even in our desire to have land as Kenyans. There's a question here from Anthony Mwangi saying, any advice on stock investing in Kenya? And then I'll ask the second one so that you can take them together. From Monica, for people whose businesses have been adversely affected to the point of closure, how do they start all over again? What's your advice on those two?
Okay. I believe here if I'm wrong, correct me. I believe you're talking about the stock exchange. Stock exchange is a very good place to be because, as they always say, you buy when the value of stock is low, the prices are low, and then you offload when the prices are high. Now, there are quite a number of things that we really have to consider. What really affects the stock pricing? The stock pricing is actually, to a big extent, affected by the information that the market has. In financial terms, they call it financial asymmetry. For example, if you invest in, for argument's sake, don't think that this is happening. If you're investing in Kenya Airways, now it's quite clear that Kenya Airways is not doing so well. So the information is out there that they are actually not doing well. And the question that you will ask yourself, for how long will they not be doing well? And this is all about forecasting. Do you think there's going to be a rebound of travel? How long is this the lowest price that we've had in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Do I really need to put my money there? Do I want to risk on it? So these are questions that we really have to keep asking ourselves, and also ask ourselves, does everyone know about the stock that I want to invest in? For example, if you want to invest in Equity Bank, do I really know what is happening? Can I say that the banks will make profit still, because most probable the loan portfolio is still big, and because people are not paying, they will make more interest? So these are questions that we really need to ask ourselves. The only other thing I would like to say is that because our information is not so well flowing in this economy, you need to be very careful, because when you think that you've hit the lowest, you might not be at the very lowest. There might be other things that are really affecting them. The other aspect that I would like to say, even when you're investing in stock exchange, don't invest in sectors that are already experiencing issues. Just focus on the sectors that are doing well. For example, banking is a no-brainer. The worst that will happen is that you don't lose your money, but you don't make a lot of profit. If you put your money, for example, in sectors that relate to hotel, then you might be really exposed. So that's what I would say about stock investment. For the people who have been adversely affected to the point of closure, the thing I keep asking, and I highlighted that, how do we preserve the assets that we have? You can't keep working on a business that requires your time and it's making losses. And when you do forecasting, you still don't see the end of the tunnel. Or if you like, if you see the end of the tunnel, it's a light of an oncoming train that might actually go ahead and crash you. So you really have to evaluate and ask yourself, if I have a loss-making venture, it basically means that it's prudent to hold the business. Preserve your value that bring you some interest, such that cash you have is not lost. And when things turn up, then you have some money to put back to the business. Now, the only other thing that I highlighted in the session is the issue of portfolio management. Don't close shop. There are still people making some money somewhere. And when you look at your profit and loss, you have to keep asking yourself, what else can I invest in? Where is a silver lining in all these? And then, of course, you can now put in a bit of money, but with a bit of caution, I would say. Don't invest a lot of money or a big proportion of your money in something that you have never tried before. Tread with caution, because that can easily be your final blow in the small. You can hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Yes, so that's all I can comment on that.
All right, I think we'll take 2 more questions because we have 5 minutes to close our very, very informative webinar. I think next time we'll extend it to beyond an hour so that we don't cut off questions. There's a question from Rose Karaoke, and I'll take that as well with the one from David Ndolo, asking what business is good to venture into during COVID? And David Ndolo is asking, what are your thoughts on consolidating and making money from agriculture and food-related enterprises? You can take those 2.
Okay, yes. My quick response on what is a good venture during this period of COVID is I will not be very specific because the number of possibilities are many. But what I would really like to really push on is how risky is the business. The financial people say the more the risk, the more the return. And of course, when the return is very good, we are always tempted to put in more money and more money, more money. But just be worried, especially in this period where things are a bit thick. And here, when I talk about risk, I'm talking about the risk of the product or service. Can it rot? Can it be challenged in terms of quality? How easy is it to basically look for it? Is it a very technical product? Do I need some technical guys to tell me how good this product is? And is it beyond my knowledge? And then the next question is, how specialized is this product? Is it something that, you know, if it's technology, can become redundant, you know, very easily? Do I have the risk of not being paid? So if you ask me, we really need to evaluate our businesses from the risk front. This is a time that you have to be very risk averse. For those who are very conservative, well done. This is your period. For those who go by the head and want to conquer the world, just apply some caution. Apply some caution, tread carefully, spread your portfolio, such that if you burn on one thing, you have some few incomes coming from something else. Then my thoughts on consolidating and making money from agriculture and food-related enterprises. Food is one of those areas that whether you are fighting, whether there is no fighting, whether there is corona, whether there is no corona, you will always have food. And in fact, one thing that has come out very clearly is that most of the people who are doing something that, you know, has a hobby or something, it's either baking. I've had people who have, you know, ventured in the apartments WhatsApp group, and they nowadays make menus, and people choose menus. And when you wake, you just post your, you know, your requirement there on the WhatsApp group, and it's delivered at your doorstep instead of going to Tuskys or Naivas, for example. And for sure, if you have a niche, agriculture, in fact, I know some of the big billionaires of the world have said the next big millionaire or billionaire, if you are talking in Kenya shilling, of Africa will actually come from agricultural-based enterprises. It's an area that we really have to watch. It's an area that you can really spread your wings, basically from farm to the last mile. And this is an area that we really have to invest in. And if you like my personal thoughts, has been quite a bit of a challenge in terms of the quality of the food that we eat. If you're actually able to deliver quality to people, and of course, in Kenya, we have quite a bit of middle class. And that middle class really want to take care of their health. And like I said, health is your biggest asset. And one way of capturing them is delivering for them quality. Quality, and they will pay the premium. So for me, this is a very good venture, if you like. Yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Henry, for those nuggets of wisdom. I think this has been a 1 hour excellently spent. What value-adding tips you have put onto us and in our minds, and we are taking this with us over to implement. Members and guests on the page and on this call, 1 hour seems to be up. It is insufficient. I think in the next webinar, we shall increase the time. But we invite you to join us at Springboard Capital. This is the entrepreneurship advisory that we give individuals and businesses and encourage you to run sustainable businesses. As an organization, we keep saying that we are challenged to run local businesses and run them well. Henry, members are asking for this presentation. We shall ask if we can share your IP with the members on this page. They have found it useful. They want to go and interact with it. Do we have your permission to share this presentation?
Yes, for sure, for sure.
All right, so there you go, generosity from Springboard Capital. We want to end this meeting. Thank you very, very much for attending. Henry, thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for putting this together. Thank you for coming and sharing with us. Thank you for your personal time that you have so well sacrificed to give words of wisdom to Kenyans. Thank you everybody for being here and for joining us. Please follow us on our social media pages. Please like our pages and follow us so that you can get more information. Please subscribe online to our newsletter so that we can update you on the next topics. Please tell us as well the topics that you would love to hear so that we can bring to you relevant content to add value in your personal and professional lives.